Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Picture Story number 2, an anthology from 1986, published by Ben Katchor. We start off with a beautiful wraparound cover by Jerry Moriarty. I love this before we turn it. Phosphenes, Men's Adventure, Tuberculosis. But this is a really nice wraparound. Very strange, but there's an explanation. An American Indian is delivering apples and oranges to people's cellars. At this house, a window shade blows and reveals a lesbian seduction scene. The Church of the Holy Rabbit is a memorial to a pet. This is just craziness. So he just came up with this crazy way to distribute fruit. That this truck would have this weird rollers that, and everyone's basements have little catchers so they can get fruit. Just a nuts idea, but really well painted, really nice looking. Love the colors on this. The first issue of this was published in 1978. I didn't even know it existed until the internet. And oh my God, it's like, I think they made 500 or something. I think Ben Katchor made it. Edited it when he was a student at SVA, the School of Visual Arts. So I think they made barely any. So I'm probably never going to find a copy. Pretty much Ben Katchor's in it, and a lot of artists I never heard of. I assume they were fellow students at SVA. But I usually like to make videos, like have a complete run if I can. So I'm never going to find Picture Story number 1, probably at any price. So I'm just going to show off this comic, and it's really good. Look at this beautiful inside front cover by Jack Moriarty. Jack Survives, Part 1. It's very odd. I just love the bold colors, though. It's really neat. We've got a contents page, and there's always like really fun quotes taken from various sources. We have a little thing here by Peter Blegvad called The Nomad. It's very odd. I don't even think I could describe this to you. But it's kind of fun. I like the weird little cartooning going on there. So it's strange because this magazine seems to be like Jerry Moriarty's all over it, even though Ben Katchor's the editor. But you'd almost think this was the vehicle of Moriarty's. And you probably, if you've seen Jerry Moriarty's work, he does this a lot. These kind of like 2-page spreads with a little bit of story, like illustrated stories. And they're always really interesting little stories. They're just nuts. Basically, these guys are out in the Midwest, and they're milking their cows. This airplane flies by really low, and he taxis down the road. It's like some old Spitfire from World War II. All of a sudden, the pilot gets out, jumps in this purple Cadillac that's waiting, and drives off. So the farmer gets in the airplane, and after seeing all these movies, he knows where the firing button is, and he accidentally shoots up all of his cows, kills every last one of them, before he can stop the machine guns. Very interesting. So this is a Christian Morgenstern chronology. And this is kind of like the life story of this artist/writer from, I believe, the 1800s. This whole issue seems to be dedicated to him. There's all these references to this artist. Well, here's the life story about him. This is by an artist named Dizi, D-I-Z-I. Never heard of him before. I assume maybe a School of Visual Arts graduate, but pretty nice cartooning. And it's pretty interestingly written, this chronology of his life. He sounds like he was like an early Dadaist, before there was Dada. Just this really, like, his humor and his writings always had this, like, really fun sense of humor and really kind of surreal. Before that word was a thing, too. I never heard of this guy. Part of me, I guess I should have looked him up. Maybe they made him up. I don't know, because I've never heard of him. But from reading some of the stuff in this issue, I'm just like, man, I should look this guy up. He sounds really interesting. We have this truck journey by Martin Millard, who I assume is an English cartoonist because there's 2 strips in here and they take place in England. And we see this truck driver get in his truck, and it's just him driving. Kind of interesting art style. Obviously, you can see lots of cross-hatching, almost obsessive. But nothing really happens in this comic. It's just like a silent, just observation of this truck driver stopping at a diner, continuing to drive. I do like this art. It's very odd. Kind of interesting, though. It's almost like he's got craft, but then he's like purposefully like making it kind of sloppy. Like, you know, look at that face. That's a very primitive drawing of a guy's face. But just by the way he draws everything else, I think this guy has a good eye. Who knows? I never saw this guy before or since. So that's all that happens. And then the last 3 panels, he's driving again. So I don't know what to think of that story. I do know what to think of this, though. Look at this beautiful painting by Jerry Moriarty. One of his little picture stories again. This is called Sex is a Memory. And the story, this guy, he's a father with a wife and kids. One day he gets home from work and he's like, you know, I've never climbed that tree in our yard. I'm going to do that today. Takes off his jacket, decides to climb the tree. When he's kind of high up in the tree, he looks in his bedroom window and he sees his wife seducing the neighbor's daughter. She's like a teenager. And he's so turned on, he comes and he falls out of the tree and breaks his spine. So the wife and the teenage lover come out and find him there. He never had another erection. When the teenage lesbian visits his wife in the afternoons after school, his wife wheels him into the children's room next to theirs. He sits by the window looking at the same tree as he listens to his wife and this young woman, moan in the next room. What a nasty little story, but very interesting. Man, look at just the lushness of this paint. I love this purple here. So there's a lot of pages like this that are really kind of fun. And just like with weird little factoids and little things they've clipped out of old magazines, but almost all of them are really interesting. This one, I mean, some of them are hard to believe, but this was in Popular Science in 1937. Shouts could be heard from New York to Oregon if a man's voice was as powerful for his size as that of a tree frog. I don't know. Doubtful. Just lots of fun little things. And some really nice art here by Jerry Moriarty, illustrating some of them. Page of ads from a bunch of these artists. Another picture story by Jerry Moriarty. God, I just love the body language in here. The way he poses these figures. And this one's crazy. It's like this crazy film noir. This woman comes home to her apartment building and some guy is like coming down the hall, grabbing his gut, and blood is spilling through his fingers, and he's got a gun. So she runs into this bathroom, and her dress gets caught in the door. When she goes in the bathroom, there's a guy sitting on the toilet with a knife in his back. And he's like, get it out, but she can't quite reach him. And the whole time, the guy with the wound, the stomach wound, is grabbing at her dress and trying to yank her further. And she finally pulls the knife out, cuts off her skirt, and runs out the door. It almost seems like Jerry Moriarty wanted to just paint this. Just the interesting position she's in, and then came up with the story around it. It's called Tenement of Evil, by the way. I don't think I told you the last story. Sorry about that. Yeah, Sex is a Memory. That's the one about the guy falling out of a tree. Man, look at this once again. Beautiful colors. This is like this weird article by, well, it's about Peter Blegvad. No, I'm sorry, he wrote it. And he did this weird art project where he'd take an object out of some weird old encyclopedia. He'd draw it as imagined. Then he would observe it and draw it. And then months later, he would draw it remembered. And he has all these examples. And it kind of made him feel differently about the way he drew and how art works and your memory works. Some more examples: light bulb, Loch Lomond. I don't know, a loris, which is kind of animal, I guess. This little critter. Lion. And some of them are very different, as you could imagine. Kind of an interesting art project. I mean, I don't draw, so I can't even draw anything, so. But then he would even push it, whereas imagined, like this is supposed to, he did a jaw. And his imagined one, he decided to do this crazy, like, surreal, I don't know what that is, but it looks kind of cool. Next, we have editor Ben Katchor's. This is kind of an epic story. It's not even that long, but Ben Katchor puts so much interesting plot in here and characters as he does. This is one of my favorite Ben Katchors. I totally forgot about this until last night. I totally forgot this story. So there's this printer. This sailor comes in, and he says, I want to cover the original label on my shoe with the name of my company. Something like this. And he gives him a weird little sketch. So he says, I got to send out to the artwork I got to send out for the artwork on something like this. You have to give me a couple of days. So he tells this little kid, I guess he works for him, to run it over to the art department. And then it's his lunch break. So he meets his wife, and she says, let's go to Lichter's. And the short order cook there seems to be a really disagreeable guy. He's always arguing with the owner. He's just kind of like this asshole. And after one more argument with the owner, he looks over at the wife. Looks like he's blowing her a little kiss, and she's like peeking behind the menu. Seems responsive. So we see this guy handing out flyers for this new restaurant, Joe Miller's restaurant. So then we have another client come in, and I guess he's been delaying his order. He says, hey, I'm here for the Laszlo job. I got backed up. I'll have them first thing in the morning. And the guy's, we see his thought balloons. She's like, oh man, I really screwed up. So I guess he works for a guy who is this black businessman who was very successful. He had a taxi business. He basically gave up his taxi fleet, like turned it into a co-op. So he gave all these guys jobs, just, basically gave them a little business. They all own their taxis now. And then he's like, if you drive for me, for my taxi guy company, you'll have a place to live. So he buys all of these apartment houses he buys and gives free housing to them. And then he has a chain of cafeterias where he feeds them. So he's like this amazing, like, cool socialist guy. And I guess he needs to make flyers because now he's going to make this commune. I guess things haven't been working out in the city. They're getting harassed by the cops and stuff. So he bought a giant plot of land upstate, and he needs flyers to let everyone know, like, hey, I'm going to bus you all up here, there. Anyone who wants to come to the commune. So he calls up his doctor, and he says, I'm having another outbreak of whatever he has. And the doctor says, fine, I'll expect you in 15 minutes. And he's talking to another patient, and this guy is such a weirdo. Such an interesting idea. He's a doctor who's more of a travel agent. He believes that the best thing for any disease is that there's one part of the world where that'll make you better. If he can discern what it is by like kind of probing your subconscious, and you go there, it'll cure you. Obviously a very not popular view in medicine. He has case histories. A man with gallstones cured by a visit to the Muslim cemetery in Istanbul. A child with impetigo cured by a month's stay near the Scala Opera House in Milan. It's that specific. I love it. He even had a guy cured of his eczema simply by standing on the corner of 32nd Street and Broadway every day for a month. So the printer comes up for his appointment, and he says, close your eyes and tell me what you see. And he describes this little place he sees, and the doctor's looking through all these travel books, and he narrows it down. He realizes, oh, that's the square in Rio de Janeiro. It's a certain square. So his wife is calling like a real doctor. And the doctor's like, I can't help your husband if he's going to go to that quack all the time. And while she's talking to him, she looks out the window and it's that short order cook. And I guess there's a street lamp. So he pulls out his member and there's a giant shadow on the wall from the street lamp. And she drops the phone and stops talking to the doctor. She's obviously, something's going on here. So that short order cook goes up to this men's club, and that sailor's there from the first page. And basically they're planning some kind of journey. He's like, be at the dock on time. So we see a little flashback to how the short order cook met the wife at an employment agency. And now we come back to the present. That Joe Miller restaurant's doing the full push for advertising. And the black guy comes back for Laszlo's job. And once again, he's all like, sorry, I had an emergency. I'll bring the flyers to his office tonight, personally. The guy from the art department calls him up and says, I can't figure out the scribble you sent over. I have no idea what this is supposed to be. We got to figure something out. So now we see the printer is on the corner, and I think his illness is catching up with him. He's not feeling too good. And we see in a window, looking down on the street, it's the short order cook and his wife. Obviously, they've been having an affair for a while. And she has no idea her husband's out the window. And she says, I've suffered 5 years with a man whose main interest was looking at garbage in the street. So we find out the printer is fascinated by finding weird little things on the sidewalk, even little labels on packaging. He's just kind of a weirdo. And the short order cook says, come with me. He's a sick man. You're young. And he says, I'll see that he's taken care of the best. So we see that young black man. I'm sorry, that's who that is. The one who's saying, oh, Jesus, what have I done? Sorry. And I guess he gambled the money he was supposed to use to print the flyers. Thought he'd get it back. So he's just feeling really guilty. The reason why he gambled, I guess he's not a normal gambler, but he had a vision in the night of U.S. Grant floating in his bedroom. So he figured that must be a sign. $200 on General Ulysses in the third race to win. So the sailor comes back into the printer's office, tells him, the printer tells him about the problem with the art department, the art studio. And he says, that's fine. He says, no hurry. But his thought balloon, he's saying, forget it, you jerk. They have plenty of printers in Rio de Janeiro. So the printer is looking like he's more healthy. His wife says, you look 100% better. And, of course, she wants to go to Lichter's, where her lover works. And while he's in the bathroom washing the ink off of his hands, well, everywhere, he's got on his neck, he's got ink spots. When he comes back into the diner, the owner is just like, it looks like somebody beat the crap out of him, and it's chaos everywhere. And he says, where's my wife? And the owner says, the cook. She went with him. The cook. So he runs to the candy store where his wife works. And the owner says, oh, you know, sometimes the girls, there's a break room upstairs. And it's this total nice little, quaint little bedroom. And he says, you know, sometimes with a boyfriend to relax. So he's realizing what's going on. And so meanwhile, before they take off on a ship, the short order cook basically was true to his promise. His wife felt guilty about leaving her husband. So he said, I'm going to take care of everything. And we're not going to leave this guy high and dry. So he's buying like 50 pairs of pajamas for him. They basically bought him a residency in this kind of like convalescence home or old age home. And even buy a coffin for him. So and a headstone. So his funeral's all ready to go. He's like this really ethical adulterer, or Lothario. He's just like, yeah, you know, I'm stealing his wife, but I'm going to make sure that guy's okay. And then the sailor comes up to the short order cook, says, he screwed up our labels. And I don't know what they're planning, but the short order cook is kind of furious. He says, I can't leave a single scrap of paper with my name on it in this country. I don't know why. So they call a taxi and decide to go to the art studio to get that scrap of paper. And it turns out that scribble was supposed to represent the same square in Rio de Janeiro that the printer described when he visited the doctor. I guess he wants to start this business in Brazil, selling mate. So he says, this is my fiance. And he says, why don't I just do a drawing of her? She's pretty. It'll be my wedding present. That'll be your logo. So he sees the flyer for Joe Miller's new restaurant. And I guess they have time to kill before the boat. So he's like, let's celebrate. Meet us at this new Joe Miller's restaurant. And bring the drawing with you. We'll meet and have a drink together. And he says, my pleasure. I'll see you in an hour. They even have to buy him fresh flowers every day. The wife is like, you promised to have fresh flowers every day. And then something special for the funeral. So they're still doing some more of this little busy work to prepare the husband for his life alone. And when he goes to the art studio, he tells him that his wife disappeared and he's very sick. So he realizes that he was just talking to his wife. He's like, dude, sorry, I don't want anything to do with this. I don't want any trouble. But just so you know, they're going to be at the new restaurant in half an hour. So they're heading there. So is the husband. And when he sees Jack Miller and he says, where's that restaurant of yours? He says, eat at home. Forget restaurants. The restaurant business took the best years of my life and turned me into an invalid. Now I get even. For each person that spends the night looking for Joe Miller's restaurant, they lose a customer. So he made this imaginary restaurant just to like get revenge on the restaurant industry. And they hang out at this little cafe, all these bitter people who devoted their lives to the service industry. So the printer runs to the docks. Oh, I'm sorry, he's heading there. And then the guy says, come up to the roof. You can at least see the ship, you know, like you can see all the ships from here. And then he passes out. His illness finally catches up to him, the printer. He says, call my doctor. And the doctor says, get him to the corner of Munster and Gazelle Street right away. So they get a taxi. Of course, when they show up, they're just like, there's no hospital on this corner. There's nothing. Why did he want us to come here? Oh, man, there's so many bizarro ideas in this comic. I love it. Ben Katchor, man. Nobody thinks like that guy. Just a singular brain. Such a great story. So here we have more about Christian Morgenstern. And we have this little comic by Ben Katchor about a stage designer. This is a poem by Christian Morgenstern. 1905, which maybe that is when Dada started. And it's a poem of just nonsense words. Shows how kind of like playful he was. Oh, we have another one of these beautiful Moriarty pieces. Killer Waitress. This guy's at a diner with his friend, and when the doors swing open to the kitchen, he sees a waitress killed to cook. The other waitress goes in the back, and then she hurriedly leaves the restaurant, takes off her apron and leaves. So the killer waitress comes out to take their money at the end, and he says, like, she was actually cool and unperturbed, even pleasant. We gave good tips and left. I never went back there again, nor have I seen my friend, for he has disappeared. I really like these little picture stories by him. He's got a really, like, dry sense of humor. Dry and wry. He was kind of a rough version of one. I don't know if he was going to paint it. It still looks great. In fact, it might even look better as a sketch. It's called Mean Men. This is just about some guy in the Old West who's really not a fighter, but he always looks as ornery as he can when he has to go to town, so the mean men won't pick on him. And one of the guys makes a lewd comment to the schoolmarm. She looks over, thinks it's him because he's got that nasty look in his face all the time, the scowl, and just shoots him dead for the effrontery of saying something crude to her. Oh, man, look at that. The Insane Meter Man. This is just nuts. This woman lets the meter man down into her basement one day. She's like a housewife. And she kind of forgot about it. She assumed he let himself out. And over the next few weeks, food is missing from the refrigerator. She smells urine in the cellar. And finally, one day, she has to go down to the cellar. And she sees the meter man hung himself. He had been living there. There's something about... This printing is great, by the way. Look at how nice this painting is reproduced. It's really lush. Another page of fun facts and a lot of stuff, more stuff about Christian Morgenstern. A lot of these are some of his writings, little quotes from him, some of his poems. This is crazy. This is so like something from National Lampoon or something. This is something he wrote back in like the turn of the century from the classified ads of a daily newspaper in the year 2407. So he's like trying to imagine what the world would be like. English church, rubber, collapsible, includes contents, 1,250 marks. This really weird, surreal stuff. This illustration is by Dizi, that cartoonist from earlier. Oh, this is nice. We get a Mark Beyer, Tony Target story, Destiny. And if you've read Mark Beyer, it's very similar, though this is a little more upbeat. Because Tony Target's in this foreign land, and he's actually happy for once in his life. He's like, people seem to be nice to me here. And then he has to go to the hospital. He has some kind of a, I don't know, attack. But then they kick him out of the hospital. They're like, you're not very sick. You got to get out of here. And then, of course, it turns, you know, Mark Beyer can't have a comic strip without paranoia and fear. And so all of a sudden at night, even though he said that this country is like very very friendly, all of a sudden he's like, the streets are fraught with danger tonight. I'd better be careful. A car's following me. I better hide in this nightclub. And so he runs into this dressing room and hides under the dressing table. But then pretty soon it fills up with like the after show crowd. You know, they're having a little congratulatory get together. And someone says, there's a little guy under the dressing room. So the cops come to take him away for trespassing. And then these tanks show up. Of course, they're just ridiculous looking with these like giant cats driving them. And the cops get out to confront them and they blow them away. And Tony Target runs off. We have another story by Martin Millard, that English guy. And this is once again, I mean, this has words in it, so it's has a little bit of narrative, but not really much. It's just a guy in a train talking about, yeah, every now and then we stop. We're on the way to Wales. We passed many farms. It rained in Milford. Obviously much sketchier than that first one. It looks like almost like a comic diary page, you know. So in Wales, he visits some old friend. They have a nice get-together at a pub. Really nothing much happens. The friend takes him back to his house. He makes him dinner. And then he goes home to London. Don't know what to think about this guy. Very mundane. And this one, you know, is pretty sketchy. But it's kind of interesting seeing this guy. You know, someone who can draw just the quick sketches he does. So this is Jack Survives Part 2. It's the same exact thing happening on that inside front cover, but it's just from a different angle. The teapot is spouting fluid. Jack has two light bulbs in his hand. One's dropping. Actually, let's check that out. Was it the same thing? Oh, I guess this is a second later and from a different angle because he's trying to get one of the light bulbs in. And then I guess we see he's distracted by the spewing water and dropping the light bulb. Once again, crazy primary colors. That's like an assault on your eyeballs. And that's it for picture story number 2. I hope you enjoyed it. Just very, like, interesting, odd little comics. And, I mean, anything, getting a nice Ben Katchor story, that's always, like, worth the price of admission right there. But, man, those Jerry Moriarty paintings are gorgeous. I've seen a bunch of Jerry Moriarty over the years in Raw. I own Jack Survives, you know, it's just solo comic. But this is some of the most impressive art I've ever seen by him. It's really nice looking stuff. Just gorgeous paintings. So that's it for today's video. And hopefully I'll see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.